We're at
Rolling,
17.
rolling, rolling, get them podcasts rolling. Rolling, 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 ride.
Hello and welcome to Take a Beat. This is our 17th episode and we're so excited to be here with you and we can chat with you about stuff, about things that we talked about in service and just the life of the church. So take a beat, grab a beverage and join us. Comment below with any thoughts you might have. And I am here today with Pastor Mike Rody. Thanks, P. Mike, for being here.
Sure, I was thinking maybe instead of a beverage, popcorn?
Popcorn. Oh, I love popcorn. Yes.
Or chips.
Oh, I also like
tempeh.
chips.
I think I might be hungry.
Chocolate.
Chocolate.
Okay, so you were preaching this past weekend. And, first off, congratulations. Your son graduated from high school. How do you feel?
I feel like an adult now because both of my sons have now graduated from high school. And it's amazing. Hard to imagine my little guy, my littlest little guy, going off to college.
And if you were at service, that the son who graduated were the one with mud all over his face, that, he had a lot of photos there on the screen.
I can shoot you those if you want to slip it in right here.
Yeah, we can do that, definitely. But wow, this, if you don't know this, we have our link to our sermon in the notes below. But yeah, so we talked a lot about household. So who's all in your household growing up?
My household was always a complicated household because my parents were so open to having people involved in our household. So my household included definitely Pastor Dave and his family were part of our household. Pretty much the youth of our church were part of our household. At different times, we had different people living with us. We had a lady and her son that lived with us for about a year. And they're part of our household. I still see him on Facebook every now and then. We've had a couple of immigrants who lived in our household over time. Lots of Japanese exchange students that are part of our household, some of whom my mom still keeps up with. And then anyone who's part of our family, my parents were kind of favorite aunt and uncle to a lot of my cousins. And so anyone who was related to us was part of our household, especially after my grandparents died, because their place had been the place to go to. And then my parents' place became the place that we all gathered.
Yeah, I was telling PD this last week, that was the case with my family as well. Like, I think at some point growing up, my mom would be cooking for 13 people, and you know this, I'm an only child. There's like in our nucleus family, there's only 3 of us. And then she had like 10 extra mouths to feed. Like there's ministry people who are there from like Kupang to train for ministry, and like my dad's nephew and nieces. And
yeah, well, one of the things I learned as a kid was that the door is always open, and literally to the point that I remember coming home from grocery shopping one day and Pastor Dave, who wasn't a pastor at that point, was laying on our living room carpet with a nice plate with a sandwich he had made and a glass of something he was drinking and just reading the newspaper, waiting for us to come home. And that was our house. Lots of people. And they were all part of the family.
so with that, like translating into our conversation about church being that household metaphor for the church, how does that experience translate or affect how you think about God's family and God's household?
Oh, well, this is one of the reasons why for me, welcoming people at church is like such a big thing. I mean, I just feel like my experience in church growing up, there was always a number of different people that I would walk in the door and see. And there was this guy named Rex who always had a story and would always greet us. And he's a lot older than me. I think he's older than my parents, but he showed us that he loved us. He cared for us. He valued us. And I felt like it was like family. Rex Kennedy.
Oh, I know Rex.
I know Rex. Always has a story.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was thinking this about being household, even I think we mentioned this before when our very first podcast together, but you let me use your social security number to set up a phone account when I first got to the U.S. without even meeting me.
Yeah, you were part of our household and we haven't even met yet. But
yeah, I contributed to your credit score.
But you were part of the extended tentacles of the Rody household. So.
Tentacles. Oh, yeah. That's an interesting image. Tentacles.
Tendrils. Let's use that.
Tendrils. Yes. So I feel like that's always an interesting. A fun fact about getting to know Pastor Mike is because he let me use his account.
Taking care of these foreign college students.
I'm glad we met and became friends and coworkers.
And I'm oh so glad you didn't take off and do bad things with my social security number.
I think you trusted that to two very extra responsible people.
That's right.
So I wanted to chat a little bit about the word that it came up in your sermon quite a bit, but it's a word a lot of us don't like. Accountability. Can you first? Because sometimes I talk to people and they don't know what is accountability? What is it? How do you define accountability?
So accountability is when you kind of got to tell people how things went after they happened. Mm-hmm. Kind of like when you're a kid and you come home and your mom says, "How'd your test go?" And she's asking because she's hoping it went well, but she knows it probably didn't. But she's asking because she wants to hold you accountable to keep working and to do well. Okay, maybe your test scores were better than mine, but mine weren't always very good.
No, my mom was the teacher, so she had access to my test.
She already knew. But accountability in our faith is looking out for each other's best interests, which is what I always say. If you love someone, the way that you love someone is by doing what's in their best interest. Yeah. And accountability is not, hey, I want to know how you did so I can dump on you and frustrate you and make you feel bad. I'm looking out for your best interest. So I'm going to ask you, hey, how you doing with that thing we talked about last week? Or, hey, I noticed you weren't here.
Yeah.
Are you doing okay? I haven't seen you for a while.
Yeah.
How's your prayer life? What you been reading in your Bible? And not at all to be interrogating anyone, but to encourage people to grow in their faith.
And what does that look like? I know that I think growing up, or even when I was in college, there are people who they're like, oh, I'm part of an accountability group. And so it becomes very systematic. It's sort of I always feel a little I've never been in one, but I always felt like it was this daunting thing when you go and meet up and you kind of have to lay it all out like a public confession thing.
Well,
but
it's funny because accountability, I wouldn't say that it's something that I'm great at, because I have a tendency to move forward in life and not necessarily get too deep with people. But at the same time, I have people who would be able to ask me, so Mike, how you doing in your spiritual life?
Yeah.
Where are you at? And I would feel the need to honestly share with them. I mean, I grew up as a kid really good at hiding things, covering things up. I felt like that was my skill in life. I probably could have been a good poker player if I'd gone that far.
Or a pastor's kid.
Oh yeah,
your parents did ministry.
it's important. I have a lot of people that in pastoral ministry that I do accountability with, people that I ask, people that have conversations with me and tell me personal things and ask me to help them, and I help them think of a process, and then I try to follow up on them and help them grow. I've got people that I meet with in soap groups that accountability isn't always about, hey, what's your deepest sin? Sometimes accountability is, hey, you had an application last week. How you doing on that?
Yeah.
Or hey, let's grow together. So let's look at the Bible together. So accountability is not always a daunting task.
And I think you do a very good job of it, especially like seeing it in the context of our staff. I think as the executive pastor, I think you do that a lot with a lot of our staff members, including myself. Even like checking in on, like for me, how I dealt with things after my mom passed, or how I dealt with things with different transitions and things like that. I think, and I know that you do that with a lot of the different staff members at IES as well. So yeah, I think the way I see you do this well is just it flows very well. It's not that daunting. Oh, let me sit you down and ask you, did you like how's your prayer life?
I think the key is how it fits into the household. If you're part of a household, you value people.
Yeah.
And you want what's best for them.
Yeah.
And so you don't interrogate them.
Yeah.
But you do ask them insightful questions, or questions that can hopefully help them think about things. And I think asking questions, it's sometimes nerve-wracking. Mm-hmm. I think in Southeast Asia, generally, culturally, when people get asked a question, they're being assessed. And so I try very hard to not be an assessy questioner, but I interview everybody.
Yeah.
It's part of my nature, but it's because I value people and I enjoy people and I like seeing people thrive.
So let me ask the flip side of it, being accountable to people, because that part, I think we're fine with asking other people how they're doing, or how, your application from SOAP went this past week or things like that. But when putting ourselves in the position of being accountable to people, that's a little challenging. How does that play in our household?
I think it's easier in a household where you live and you see people day in and day out, because you can't hide the bad with the good. Mm-hmm. In church, it's a little tough, because we can put on our best clothes and we can smile for an hour or two and we can slip through. But and as pastors, to be honest, a lot of us are really cautious about what we let out to people.
Yeah.
Because it's a complicated part of leadership. But it is really important. We're not perfect. And I came to the conclusion a long time ago that as a pastor, if I present myself as perfect, I'm failing miserably. And so I've got to be able to be honest. And I may not tell all the details, but I do have a few people that I let know if things are difficult.
Yeah.
I have a soap group on Friday that we're very personal with each other. And I have a few other soap groups which we talk more personally about stuff, my Thursday guys. And now I have a new group on Wednesday also, and I think that's going to be a pretty tight-knit personal group. And so just, being honest with people that, hey, I have struggles too, and I'm struggling. We may not be in the place to share everything. Sometimes we have to have the unspoken prayer request, click the button here. But it's important to share our difficulties.
Yeah, that's something that I've learned a lot being back here in Jakarta. Not even like the second time around, but like I moved to Jakarta.
We should talk about that sometime. The whole process. No, seriously, we should talk about the process of moving back sometime.
Yeah.
Because I've observed it with so many people, including yourself, and I think there's a lot of people that don't do it well.
Yeah. And I think though, even like I was in ministry in the US, and I realized how compartmentalized everything was when I was there. And then moving back to Jakarta, everything is so interrelated, and your congregation can be your friend.
It's a much better way to do ministry.
Yes, but then like it took a little bit for me to readjust.
It takes a while to shift.
Yeah, and so the whole like, being vulnerable, but at the same time, it is needed. Again, like you said, I don't have to share everything, every single detail, but that vulnerability and being available for other people to encourage me, and because it's not just calling out on stuff that's wrong, but it's also about like letting other people encourage you when you are discouraged. I think that like for me, it took a while to actually let other people do that, and that's challenging.
Actually, I think it's an interesting part of IES that we're like that. I think a lot of churches are not, unfortunately. One of the things that I see here is that some people, for them, the accountability is just letting them hear me say, you've really come a long way in the last year. You're really growing. Because that's also something that they need to hear the account of.
Yes.
They need to hear that, because I think sometimes in the culture that dominates our church, we're always about what's not right.
Yeah.
In the broader culture. But in IES, then we come in and we start to realize, hey, their failure or dysfunction isn't the end. There's growth.
We care where you're going.
We care where you're going. People over programs.
Yes.
All of those values.
Yeah. And I think one of the interesting kind of underlying, actually you stated this in your sermon, you need to be like join the household. You have to be in it. In order for you to be accountable, you can't just slip in and slip out. You have to actually be here and let other people talk to you and talk to other people. Be in a soap group where people can ask you, you weren't here last week, where were you?
Yeah. I don't ask it that way, but yeah exactly. And that's why the background I used was a picture that I had taken a long time ago. My parents used to have this house on a big piece of property and a huge yard, and the house in the picture is on the far left side, and there's just trees and yard and forests and stuff all the way across. And I think in my mindset of church, God invites us off the street. In the old days in Jakarta, which you might not remember.
How old are we talking about?
There were beggars everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
And lots of little kids. And it would just break my heart every time we'd go. I remember one little corner where there's this little girl, and Petey and Gigi were like really ready to just like adopt this child. I mean, it was just moving in a very sad way, often. And I kind of gathered this vision. I think it's something that God gave me, that God saves us and brings us to his house, but some people just stay out in the yard.
Yeah.
He hoses us off, cleans us up, and maybe we sit on the porch, but we don't go inside. And what really he wants us is, come inside. I've got gifts for you. I have a place for you.
Yeah.
I have opportunity for you to grow and mature. I have responsibility for you so you can do great things. I'll train you and develop you. And we see it over and over in Scripture. Like we've been reading in the story of Abraham. Abraham isn't chosen because he's a good guy.
No,
Abraham is chosen so that he can grow to understand who God is and put his faith in him. So we can all realize, oh, I can grow like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And man, like sometimes it's frustrating for me when, like, I think, I mean, I grew up in church. I had to, my parents were pastors. But I think I realize how much that connection is very important, especially now. Like I would say that this IES family is my closest family. I'm not even that close to my extended family after my parents' passing. So I think like it frustrates me when I see people and they're like, oh, I didn't get anything out of church, or they're like, they seriously just come in late and then leave early before they can even interact with anyone. That's just my personal frustration.
Hey, we most weekends, Friday, Thursday, when we're doing our family prayer time, I pray God prepare us to be a blessing to people and also to receive. But I think so often people think about what they're going to get at dinner, not what are they going to contribute.
Yeah.
And that, in a big household, everyone jumps in.
Yeah.
When all my cousins are over, everyone participates.
Peel the potatoes.
Someone might be holding the baby, but other people are doing other stuff. And someone might be playing out in the yard, but it's because they're playing out in the yard with all the little kids and keeping them out of the kitchen.
Yeah.
Everyone has a role.
Yeah.
And as we grow, our roles change. And I think that too often people are in it for what is in it for them, which isn't a household.
Yeah.
That's retail Christianity. Not very healthy.
Yeah, and you don't really live in a store. I hope not.
No.
Okay, so just kind of wrapping everything up. I want to be practical. What are some of the things we can do to really be in this household?
No. You got to look at where you're standing. I mean, really literally, am I standing in the yard looking at the house? Am I up on the porch smiling at people as they walk inside? Am I heading inside to find out what it is I could do, how I could be a part? I know that there's a lot of people that struggle with the whole relationship thing, but we have a lady in the church who's very cautious, and we've just watched her over the last 10 years slowly get to where she's willing to talk to people and engage with people. And why is that? Because God has been working a work in her life, helping her realize that she needs people and she needs to participate. I don't think most of us are really in that condition. Some of us just haven't decided that we want to be our Father's children.
Yeah.
And so we'd rather stand on the edge of the street and look at the house of our Father, show up every week, enjoy the hubbub, but not actually get involved.
Yeah.
And what we need to do is make a decision. Are we going to get to know people, even people that are not like us?
Yeah.
If you saw my family pictures, my family, the four of us look a lot alike, but everyone else is quite different. That's the family I grew up with. My family now, we're mixed, and it's awesome.
Well, but also
but you get to know people, you take on roles and responsibility. Those things help you mature.
Yeah.
And
that's it.
Yeah.
And wherever you're at right now, we just want to tell you that you're welcome here, and we invite you to come join the rest of the family.
Yeah, in fact, did you know that my wife and I host the Global Life Group on Zoom?
See, it's online.
And so on Thursdays at 7:30 WIB, we're on Zoom with a few people, and at the moment, nobody's outside the country, but for a while, more than half of our people were outside the country.
And there's a lot of other opportunities as well. Soap groups, book club.
Wednesday noon Zoom soap group.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So soap groups, just a lot of different opportunities for all of us to be part of this household and to have people who keep us accountable and people we can keep accountable, people we can celebrate with. And I love my soap group. It's a bunch of ladies, all of them older than me. But being able to celebrate when their kids got baptized last week, and I was just sending photos in the group saying, "Oh, congratulations!" And being able to just celebrate with each other, pray for one another. When your sister-in-law was stuck in Guam, that was the big prayer request for the week. It's wonderful to be part of a family, to be part of a household, to be part of soap groups and book clubs and life groups. And we want to invite you to be part of that. If you don't have a soap group yet, join there's a Wednesday noon one?
Wednesday noon Zoom soap group is online.
And then your
And
global.
then if you want to do the evening life group, which is not much different than a soap group, is the Global LG.
Global
Life
LG.
group.
See, all ways that we can connect. Well, I think our time is up, but thank you so much, Pastor Mike, for chatting with me about this household of faith we are in. And everyone, thank you so much for joining us on this chat. Remember, you can connect with us either on Instagram or Facebook or join our online community. And what else? Well, we'll see you next week.